you need to do that in front of the governor. I need a raise. That sounded really good. Derek, really appreciate that. Thank you for the friendship. Thank you for the work that you do as well for the state. And in the Bay Area, I'm trying to get you to do more across the state as well. But Derek and his company, Marinship, they've done some incredible work in the transportation space, and just in general, anything related to construction, stormwater, cleaning up, major encampments, the largest encampment in the entire state of California. Marinship got the opportunity to take care of that for the state. So Derek, appreciate it. Thanks for all that you do for the state. Give him a hand. Thank you. Very briefly, before I get to my remarks, I want to recognize some other people real quick. Chairman Simon, I told you if we go to Vegas, my fee goes up if we go on a road show. But thank you for the last 24 hours, getting a chance to meet you and know you and understand the great history that you have in service to the state and with prior governor and serving on the PUC as well and in the cabinet. It's good to know that, and thanks for all that you do for this chamber and the state of California. I also got a chance to briefly meet Commissioner Brandon. I met President Adams probably about 3 years ago, so we had a few conversations. I'm sure we'll get a chance to have some conversations as well with the things going on at the port of San Francisco. So if you don't know Commissioner Brandon, please wait. That's the chairman's wife. And Dr. Ajike, my friend also from San Francisco, all these San Francisco people in the room. He's going on a road show soon. He just told me this morning. I've known Dr. Ajike since I've been in California, but he's going to 4 countries in Europe on that book tour. I got to get my book signed as well, Dr. Ajike. So if you haven't had a chance to talk to him, please do. I also have some state comrades in the room. You heard Carolyn Gray, the Director of Small Business for the state. I told Tara that her name has come up several times in meetings over the last week, in very high regard about some of the work that she's doing. The chairman mentioned in her prior experience in Fresno. Tara, we got a lot of work to do. Please call on me. But thank you for everything that you're doing for the state. Alejandro Espinoza is California's Deputy Secretary for Legislation at CalSTA, someone that works on our team in transportation. Alejandro, wave. He handles all legislation for transportation in the state, so thank you, Alejandro, for being here. And I'll close with elected officials in the room. I know I had a good chance to talk to Mayor Robertson last night. We got at least two mayors in the room, but that I know of. If the mayors don't understand, I love elected officials. Mayor of Malibu's also, please stand. Set them up, man. Set them up, mayors. Thank you, mayors, for being here. I hope that's all the mayors, our elected officials in the room. So, oh, really? What? Oh, yes, Mayor Fontaine, please stand. Yes. You see me back row, please. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here. She's been doing a lot. If you don't know her, you need to get to meet her. She's got like $50 million from Secretary Buttigieg in the last year. You need to figure out what her magic potion is for getting all that money from the feds. So, I think, yes.
No, I was saying that there's another, I think.
Oh, another mayor? Please stand. Elected official?
Elected official.
Yes, please, your name.
Leslie, I'm the first African-American woman on the Rent Control Board for Santa Monica.
Oh, wow. Wow, thanks for being here. Thank you for being here. Look, from yesterday and this morning, I mentioned to a small group that I spoke to yesterday that one thing that I'm coming away with is a sense of inspiration by seeing so many people from different chambers gathered, elected officials gathered to do this work. I'm inspired, I'll be honest. But there's a sense of urgency as well that I'm hoping to leave you with. You know, it's good to come here and have these gatherings and these summits and these discussions. There's a lot of work to do still. There's a lot of work to do still, and that's where I'm going to start with you this morning to lay a little bit of the foundation, the premise of why this discussion that hopefully leads to action is important. So, for starters, in transportation, people always ask me, so what are your goals? What are your priorities for the state of California? Where are you headed? Where are you taking the state? And we have what's called the core four, the top four most important things that I believe if we handle, if we take care of, that economy that Governor Newsom mentioned that he's proud of, that we're all very proud of, fourth, fifth largest in the world. If we continue to get these four things right, we will continue to make California the leading state nationally and sub-internationally that it is. And those four things are safety. Transportation needs to be safer. It needs to focus on equity, which is why we're here, a big part of why we're here. Climate action, its connection to sustainability, and of course as well, fourth, economic prosperity. Those four things, if we get it right, California will continue to be the astonishing leader that it's been. By the way, Governor talks about this economy. For those of you who may not be able to process that $3.6 trillion that he mentioned, you give this one quick thought. This is not part of the remarks I had in mind, but every time I think about it, it marvels me. India, the country of India, has a population of 1.2 billion rather. 1.2 billion people. Our economy is close to $500 billion more than India's. 1.2 billion people. California, 40 million. Think about that for a second. Think about that. India is 20 times larger, more than 20 times larger than California, and we have an economy that's $600 billion more than India's. It's mind-boggling to me. For those of you who are in economics, you probably understand a little bit of what I'm talking about. So here's the premise from where I'm starting today about the work that we have to do. If you look at this graphic, it shows the wealth of population's demographics of U.S. families starting from 1963 to 2019. 1963 is important because the Civil Rights Act passed in 1964. So that's a good sort of foundation, if you will, where things supposedly became more even, more equal for families throughout the country. The top graphic, you probably have a hard time seeing it, the top line, that's what's happened to white families' wealth in this country. The graphics down below, those are other races in the country. African American and Latino are those ones that you see below. So we started relatively in 1963, pretty close to one another, to today, nearly $800,000 wealth gap. $800,000 wealth gap in 2019 before the pandemic. I haven't seen these numbers since the pandemic, but things have not evened out, so to speak. You can see the direction at which we're going. When you look at poverty, fortunately, there's a little bit of some good news when you look at poverty. The blue line is African Americans and what's happened over a similar period, 1966, after the Civil Rights Act, to 2019. The blue line showing some downward trend of poverty. The yellow line is white Americans, and you can see essentially it's roughly stayed flat over the roughly 60-year period. Education is something that we always point to as an indicator of success or indicator of wealth, potentially. African Americans, you look at the graphic on the left, that's African Americans and education in 1962. In 2019, you can see where we were. We've got a lot more people who are educated, who are getting four-year college degrees. But the image on the right is white America. But they've also done the same thing, and there still remains a major gap between those two. But I think it's also important to note the fact that even though you get a college degree, we stress that in our families: go to school, get an education, all important. Even after you get an education and it's time to make money, this graphic is marveling as well. The blue bar is what the average white person who has a college degree, that's what they make, and without a college degree. And the orange is minorities, Latinos and African Americans with a college degree. So without a college degree in the blue bar, you're going to make $30,000 more, roughly $30,000 more than somebody who's African American who actually has a college degree. Work still to do. Come into, just zoom in a little bit into, that was a lot of national stuff, but just come in a little bit into California and Los Angeles specifically. I don't have my glasses on to be able to see this, but it's kind of small in this paper, so I can't see exactly what I'm talking about. But coming into Los Angeles specifically, you will see that there's also a significant wealth gap with these groups. Yeah, Asian Americans, the print is so small, hopefully you can see. The last two bars, I can tell you for sure, the last two bars, green and yellow, that's African Americans, Latinos and African Americans in Los Angeles as far as the wealth. The very farthest bar at the top, that's actually Asian Americans. So you can see, even in Los Angeles, what happens as it relates to wealth in the city. So I laid that foundation, that premise for you to say, boy, we have a lot of work to do. For those of you who may think, and this was going around after President Obama got elected, there was this notion that we've become some kind of post-racial society, that, look, you get a president, that means everything just evens out from here on out. Everybody's equal, everything's good. Not quite. As you can see by some of that information, President Obama got elected in 2008, he went into office in 2009. That wealth gap, the education challenges, all this data, housing, very similar data, almost exactly the same. So this gathering is not for the sake of the fact that we now, we have this great opportunity to not be on Zoom. That's cool. I know we say, I haven't seen this person in ages. That's all cool. But folks, there's a lot of work to do in your respective organizations to be able to turn this around. So, in transportation, what's happening? I'll share a little bit of some of the things that are going on. The Equity and Infrastructure Pledge, something called the EIP. Anybody ever heard of this? EIP, terribly great. Yes, some people are familiar with this. My good friend who we served President Biden together on his transition team, Phil Washington. Phil, some of you may know Phil from his work here for many years. Phil helped start this Equity and Infrastructure Pledge to make sure that hubs, historically underutilized businesses, have an opportunity to tap into all this money that's coming in from the IRA and the IIJA. Sort of a more organized effort beyond what the federal government is requiring. It includes DBEs as well. And as I mentioned, it's very much connected to President Biden's Justice 40 initiative, and of course, Governor Newsom's interest in creating a California for all. To date, 56 agencies, organizations have signed on to this Equity and Infrastructure Pledge. And I've also been asked to, just late last year, serve as the chairman for this effort in California called the California Plan. So there's a national effort. If you're not familiar with this, it's worth looking up. And this Equity and Infrastructure Pledge to help small businesses, historically underutilized businesses, tap into all this federal money that is coming in. What I shared last night with many people is the fact that IIJA and IRA, we got 3 years left. That's it. We've already knocked out 2 years. We have no idea. Some of you may be able to look at a crystal ball and say what's going to happen in 9 months. I don't have that ability. I don't know what's going to happen in 9 or 10 months. And if things change in Washington on the legislative and the executive side, things like this, even though there's a bill already in place, there are appropriations, money that has to be allocated to efforts like this, that stuff can change on a dime. So the focus needs to be there. This is a big deal. More of some of the things that we're doing. The Equity Advisory Committee is something that was recently started by CalSTA, the CTC, that's the California Transportation Commission, and Caltrans, to focus on projects specifically, where they are, to make sure projects and communities actually see equitable benefits, equitable outcomes as we build projects. A lot of you are familiar with redlining and how we built the freeway system in California and the rest of the country. That organizations like this, where they're not there just for lip service, they're actually getting paid, they're being compensated to do this work for transportation from California. Organizations like this are very important to make sure that our policies and funding at the state level, again, will create more equitable outcomes. This particular slide is very important as far as some of the information, just a little bit of a highlight of some of the things that we're doing. There's a DBE annual summit that we actually held. It was held in Richmond about 4 or 5 months ago, where I got a chance to speak at. That was the second annual. The very first annual DBE summit was held at SoFi Stadium. Derek Smith actually got a chance to speak there and talk about his company, Marentia. So it's one of the ways that we are trying to do a better job of reaching out to businesses across small businesses across the state who may at some point may have tried and failed to be able to get in, tap into the state. So these are some of the things that we're doing. Also, we have a small business council that has a bi-monthly meeting. Dr. Matthew Giacchi is one of the members of the small business council. It's at Caltrans. They meet 6 times a year trying to guide Caltrans, support Caltrans in its efforts to increase DBE and SBE participation with all this money, federal and state money that's coming in. It's not easy. I know some people have served on that council for 20 plus years, but that work is still ongoing, and of course it's important. There's something called the Contractor Mentor Protege Program, a mentor protege program where we team primes up with small businesses, get them together, and the primes and Caltrans help walk them through the process of how to become certified, qualified, and able to eventually win and do more work with the state. It started in District 4. This effort, this mentor protege program now is now going to all 12 districts at Caltrans. Again, the effort is to give small business more opportunities to team up with primes and to work directly with Caltrans to understand how to win work. The Caltrans strategic sponsorship program, I can talk about that if you have questions about that as well. These bills, if you're not familiar with these, please check them out when you get a chance. That passed. These are now law. SB 146, SB 150, AB 2019, all focused on getting jobs to underserved minority communities and requirements as well for the state to make sure small businesses get opportunities. That last one in particular, AB 2019, Tara Lynn Gray was heavily involved in some of this effort, but it requires that every contract, listen to this, every contract in the state, if you're not familiar with this, at least gets 25% to small businesses. So if you own a small business, or you have partners and friends that have a small business, there's a state requirement that just kicked in last year. AB 2019, check it out when you get a chance. And SB 146 and 150 are also some of the other important legislation that impact Caltrans and some of the work that's happening there. This graphic is important just to be able to show you the shared numbers of the value of the money that's coming in to infrastructure in transportation. Last year was the first time in the history of the state where the DBE program is the federal requirement. Last year was the first time in history where we put $1 billion into DBE. $1 billion. That should get an applause. You guys are waiting. That program has come a long way. This is hard for you to see, probably, but if you look at the bottom left corner, you will see roughly where this program was as far as total awards into construction projects in California in 2020. That number is roughly $2.5 billion, I believe is what it says. That bottom left corner, in FY 2023, it was $4.6 billion. The column over, one over, African Americans, and this is important, one column over at the bottom, it says $25 million roughly. That's how much was going to African American firms in 2020. If you look at FY 2023, that number is 60 million. 60 million West African Americans. So we've gone from 24 million in 2020, this is roughly when I came into office, Governor Newsom came into office, to nearly 60 million this last FY. That's how much progression and growth we've had. Now, is that something to scream home and write to mom about? Maybe not so much, but it's growth. It's growth. We're headed in the right direction. You know, the challenge and the problem that I have with this graphic, if any, is the fact that, again, one side says 4.6 billion in contracts total, and African Americans 60. So only 60 million out of 4.6 billion. Work to do. Work to do. Be able to change those numbers. Here's a little bit of just, again, the growth of the DBE program at Caltrans. This is what it's looked like over the past recent years. Some of that is Governor Brown's term into Governor Newsom's term. Growth, again, for the DBE program. Getting businesses certified is an important part of this work. And in Caltrans, this is what they were able to do as far as getting small businesses certified. I can't read any of this print, but it's so tiny on my paper here. But these are the businesses that we were able to get certified. They're small businesses who have great stories, like similar to Derek's, where they were pretty jaded about the state process, and who are now winning and getting a lot of work with the state, including this young lady, Jacqueline Pruitt, who can share stories. We can give you details about her story and how she's turned her life around from the judicial, being a part of the judicial system, to now having a small business that is absolutely thriving in California. I'll close with this. I know we recently lost, and I didn't even know he lived in California, but we recently lost Dexter King, Mr. King, his youngest child. And this is the month that we celebrate his birthday. Next month, of course, is Black History Month. This is probably one of the most quoted men in history. Oftentimes, sometimes people quote him to their own advantage for their own goals that are not aligned with actually what he meant to say. But this is one of my favorite ones, and I'm hoping to leave you with this quote, because, again, there's a lot of work to do. We're making progress. But if we think we're not going to struggle to be able to get there, we're missing the boat. This work is not easy. You see the foundation from which we are working. It's not the best one. You don't even have to go back 400 years for minority organizations or minority business or demographics or race in this country. Just start from the 60s, start from the 70s. foundation is not the greatest. If we're gonna equalize, if we're gonna get the policies, if we're gonna get the money, it starts with us in this room. You have to struggle to be able to get there. That's how we get there. It comes through continuous struggle. So it's not time to rest. We got to keep pushing. We got to keep fighting for small business and people who have been marginalized and underserved for many years in this state and in this country. So I look forward to that partnership and work with you. Thank you very much. I think I'm going to do just a little bit of a Q&A. Is that right, Sheila? With people. So if you have questions, please come up to the mic.
We have a hand up here.
Just 1 second. 1 second. Are we ready with the mic?
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Yes, quick question for you. So, my name is Uzomo Cone or Vigo Alpha. We are a national environmental engineering service with offices between Chicago and California. And you're absolutely right, hit the nail on the head with regards to the sense of urgency that I hope that we all have coming out of meetings like this, because this is absolutely fantastic to see everybody here. With regards to the Meet the Prime events, because we often attend those and have attended those for years, is there any way, what would your recommendation be? Because the verbiage in there really says best efforts, and there's a gap between the subs attending and the prime is actually utilizing the subs when you get into it operationally. Is there a way to give the 25% a little bit more teeth to turn it more from a best effort more into a requirement on the prime part? Because that is where operationally it kind of falls off a cliff a little bit. So legislatively, what can we do to kind of fill that gap?
Yeah, so that's a good question. If you didn't understand, I'll try to explain a little bit of what he's saying. He's referencing AB 2019, the new state law that's passed, and how, I believe this is what he's saying, at least my interpretation, how can we make sure that there's a little bit more teeth to it so that it's enforced that 25% of all contracts in California that are state funded, that they go to small business. So part of the challenge for us on the transportation side is the fact that if you make it an absolute requirement, if I could put it that way, if you make it an absolute requirement across the entire state, it's going to be challenging for us in transportation in some parts of the state. For example, let's say, and this is just I know this is an extreme example, let's say in Humboldt, California, where there are very few sort of Latino or African American owned small businesses who can do work up in Humboldt. If you make it a requirement, it's challenging. It's going to be challenging to be able to fulfill the requirements of that work, because we're stuck without being able to get that 25%. But there are 4 regions of the state that we've said we're going to do this in. It's an absolute requirement. So one of them is the Sacramento region, LA region, Bay region, and San Diego region. Those 4 areas, it's an absolute requirement. It's not an option on AB 2019. So know that about those 4 regions. If Caltrans is doing work, or high-speed rail, or something like that, doing work in those areas, it's a requirement to follow AB 2019, starting this month. But the other parts of the state, it is not a requirement, it's just a goal. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense to you, what I'm explaining, but good question.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Edward Lombard. I'm the president and CEO of ELM Strategies. We're a public relations, communications, and community outreach firm. I want to know how we can get this presentation that you gave. This information is so incredible, and it's the type of information that on the ground we don't receive. And my follow-up question is, are there contracts for firms like mine to help you to get this information to our people who can benefit from this? Because I keep my ears to the ground pretty good on these types of things, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know a lot of this. And I think it's important that organizations like mine have this information so we can push it out, get it to the people that need to have it, because we have no idea the kind of money that's available and the opportunities. And we can't go after those opportunities if we don't know they're available.
Yeah.
Hopefully you can help me with that.
Mr. Secretary, if I could.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Edwin was our first president and CEO. This will be replayed on the California African American. Well, we have to get approval from the comms team of the secretary, but it is our intent to replay this content on our websites as well as our social media feeds. So, assuming we get the proper approvals, and I've learned how not to assume, but I'm hoping that we'll be in a position to be able to do that. But thank you for that, and please, Edwin, don't let me interrupt the rest of your answer.
Thank you, Chairman Simon. Look, you raise a good point about just making sure people have access to this information. It's honestly disheartening to me that we have not done a good enough job of making sure people know what's out there. And the fact that this governor, he believes in this stuff. Like, I mean, he spends a lot of time, some of you in the room actually meet, he has a meeting with African American leaders a few times a year to talk about issues just like this. He's super committed. He's asked me to go, like, make this stuff happen. And not just from we're not just, just talking about this stuff. There are laws that are now backing it that he signed that are saying you need to make sure this money goes out. So the amount of money that we're spending, $1 billion for the first time in the state's history going to DBEs. A lot of people don't even know that. And there's more coming. That's just the federal side. The governor has put money into broadband, into water, $14 billion into transportation on the state side. Outside of the gas tax money, this is general fund money. And I know some of this may be in the weeds for some of you. Besides the gas tax money that we use to build and maintain transportation, he's taken money from the general fund, and the budget is tight this year. We're not doing it this year, just to be clear. Don't get too excited. But from the general fund, which is where all the other revenue comes in for the state, he's taking $14 billion to spend on transportation. A lot of opportunity, but people just don't have access to the information. So we got to do better. We'll work with the chambers. Alejandro is here. Alejandro, if you don't mind getting the former chairman's business card, and we'll make sure that the chambers are a big part of how we can communicate this, to make sure that this information is getting out. But more money than the budget for Caltrans, just to close up on your question, the budget for Caltrans is $20 billion. $20 billion. When I started, when I was the director, it was almost $15 billion. That was 4.5 years ago. $5 billion growth. Just think about that. More money than ever before. Yeah. Thank you. Good question. I'm sorry.
Secretary Amashawkin, my name is Kevin Harbour. I'm president of BizFed Institute, a 501c3 nonprofit where we convene forums on public policy and issues that affect the regional economy. One thing I'd like to ask you, I was really impressed by your slides, but I'd like to be more impressed in the sense that I saw the growth from 25 million to 60 million. Next stop should be 150 million plus, right? And the way that I think one of the ways that we need to get there is looking at business preferences. Is there any strategy on how we can help DBEs better compete against out-of-state companies, when these RFPs and opportunities come out?
Very good question, but I want to be clear. Kevin, right?
Yes, Kevin Harbour.
Kevin, from BizFed, thank you again for everything that I just learned a lot about what BizFed does last night, being introduced to it. 420,000 businesses you represent, is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, that's
And 5 million employees.
5 million employees, goodness gracious. That's like a state unto itself. Well, just to be clear on your question, are you saying how can DBEs in California become more competitive against DBEs from other states, or was it clear?
Is there a way that we can leverage business preferences, right? The preferences on how companies are chosen. Number one, we need to narrow that wealth gap, right, and impact that slide. And secondly, if we have more DBEs experience, it makes them more competitive, because I know probably a lot of companies get chosen because we don't have as much experience. And then secondly, once we win those contracts, that money is going to be recycled here locally instead of being taken out of state.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I'll be honest that I don't actually know what percentage of contracts are from out of state, well, DBEs or primes. I really don't know what that number is, so I don't know how much of a challenge or problem exists there where people coming in from out of state to do the work. I think we can always, again, do a better job with this mentor protege program that I mentioned. That's how when a small business sits down with a prime, and the primes are coming around to understanding how important it is to make sure small business have an opportunity. They come around. Before they used to be like this, turf battle, like, look, you're too small, I get all the work, it's a little bit, it's coming together because there's an understanding that there are regulations, there are requirements now for them to give small businesses an opportunity. So I think connecting that more, making those connections with the primes more will help, will make a difference to help small businesses understand how to do this work and how to deliver. Because if you do it and you deliver, the opportunities will keep coming. They'll keep coming. Once you prove yourself with the state, there's no doubt about it. I got example after example of where that's the case. So it's just getting your foot in there. But if I could leave something with you related to that, like if you know small businesses who are jaded about the process and they're like, look, I'm done with the state. They got too many loopholes, CEQA, NEPA, certified, all that. I get it. Come back around. Tell them to come back around. I don't want to give you my email directly because I'll get a billion emails. But look, this is a personal issue for me almost. I want us, that number you mentioned, from 24 to 60 million, I don't know how much longer I'll have an opportunity to serve in this role. I want it to be as high as it possibly can be when my time is up. Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Robert Sacedo. I'm President and CEO of Community Build, also one of Campus board members, and co-founder of Groundswell Water Justice Initiative throughout the state. My question is this, and when Proposition 209 was passed, it changed the state constitution to not allow for race-based contracting for the state of California. However, agencies like Caltrans, Department of Health Services, etc., all receive federal funding. So if there's one penny of federal funding in any state contract, it seems to me that it should default to the federal standard for race-based contracting. So that's a strategy I think we can do. The other part of that would be, if you don't know, over $20 billion of contracts were lost, meaning people of color, Black, Hispanic, Asian, etc. Over $20 billion of lost contracting took place over the last several years since 209 went into effect. And in years past, when you approached Caltrans, so these numbers you put up were really good to see. Their default position was, because of 209, we cannot do race-based contracting. But I argue that you can, because there's federal money in this decision.
Wow.
Thanks, everybody, and I'll see y'all later.
By the way, that'll help you expedite and exponentially grow that number you're trying to get to.
You know a lot. You clearly understand this program and know a lot about it pretty well. Let me just say, I don't want to get too much into my personal opinion about 209, but I was surprised at the outcome when it went back to the ballot 2 years ago. Was it 2 years ago? I think it was 2 years ago when it went back to the ballot, and it still came out as it should be a state law. I'll just say I'm surprised in this era that we're in, where people are saying equity, to still have that as state law. I'm not going to get into my personal opinion again. I'm surprised that that's still there. But to your point, keep in mind that, even though you're making a very good point, keep in mind that there are two separate programs at Caltrans, and we can still, all of us in this room can still take advantage of it. So you mentioned the federal program. That's the DBE. That's a federal requirement that is race-based. It's not race neutral. So that we literally have goals for, if you will, we call them goals for each race. Latino, African American, Asian, all the way down the line, Native American. There are specific goals that Caltrans has to meet, so that it's not race neutral. And that's where the $1 billion was spent. So we can keep going on race there. The state side is what I just mentioned, AB 2019, that is not where we can't use race because of 209. But there's a 25% requirement that says every contract, Ms. Gray here should probably speak to this, every contract should have a 25% goal for small business. Doesn't say anything about race. So 2 programs, but we can take advantage of both. I wouldn't get stuck. I think if you have lawyers come in the room, they would probably easily side with your premise, with the case that you're making, and say, federal law, what is 209? Federal law supersedes anything that 209 is saying. You should be able to do this across the board, but that's not my place to be able to say that. But very good point you're making, Chairman.
Yes, I'm waiting for a microphone. My voice is not, can I have a mic, please? I think my voice is projecting enough. Mr. Secretary, thank you. The 25% came out of an executive order in the Schwarzenegger administration. I think it was 1106.
Yep.
I was honored to work with one of your predecessors, Sonny Wright McPeak, and the governor on that. And then that enabled us to have a partnership with the primes, who represented to us that they would allocate 25% of Caltrans money. That's when it was business, transportation, and housing. But the question I have is that, as I'm sure you're well aware, and others in this space in the room, there is what's called a disparity study. And we have a firm in this part of the Oakland African American Chamber of Commerce, Mason Tillman is not here today, but that actually engages in these disparity studies in those Prop 209 states, because there are other states, including California, that have barred. And as you know, probably better than I would establish, is if you can, if the study has the return or the findings of disparity amongst certain people, then you can modify, as I understand, the contracting process. Is California in that position? Are we recipients, in terms of your area, of a disparity study, and how does that impact our dialogue today?
Is it possible to go back to can I reverse that? No. You probably pull my slide up. No, if you could pull my slides back up real quick, I'm trying to point out exactly what the chairman is referencing. So, as a part of that federal law, that DBE program, Chairman, there's a requirement for us to do a disparity study. So Caltrans actually does it. When I started at Caltrans, the DBE goal for California, this is the federal side, was 17.6%. Today, it's 22.2%. Now, when you break down that 22.2%, the chart that I showed with all the numbers, I can't even read anyway. I don't know why I'm holding right. Excuse me, real quick. So, as you can see, to your point, and some of you are not going to be able to see me here, but to your point, this is the disparity study goal. So these are the numbers that we are supposed to meet for African Americans, for example. And you can see, somebody mentioned money being left on the table. So the goal in 2020, for example, was 1.68% of all the contracts should go to African American firms. Now this is low, in my opinion, but this is what the disparity study said. 1.68%. Here's the actual. 1% happened. So you're leaving this much money. Somebody mentioned $20 billion. So you're leaving, all this is how much money, these are deltas. This is how much money you're leaving on the table. You're supposed to get to 1.44, you're below it. The reason why this looks like this right now, is saying that we're in a positive, is because the FY just started. So only 6 primes and subs have gotten work. So that's why this looks like right now in FY24, it looks so positive. Like we're in the positive. But the history is African American firms miss the disparity study goal almost every year. Millions of dollars are left on the table. To your question, so we are required to do it. Sorry for the lecture.
No, thank you.
One or two more quick questions for Cheryl?
Yeah, just real quick before we go forward. We have time for about, okay, I'm being told one, but I do have a board member that has a question as well. So we have time for 2 questions, real quick, and then we're gonna have to end it. We're gonna ask you to just make them real short. And we appreciate you, Secretary Toks, and we're being considerate of your time to get your plan. Okay.
Good morning. My name is Luetta Seawood, and I am the president of the African American Chamber of Commerce of San Joaquin County. And you mentioned several times today about small businesses. From a chamber perspective, small businesses is our business. And so my question to you is, how can we get engaged really to tap into the resources that you are explaining today? In our local county, we continually have these type of meetings where we have Caltrans there. And they're constantly talking about the rail trains and how they're going through the area. And getting DBE certification has been my primary for the past year. But then the question falls in line as, now that I'm DBE certified, now what? Because they cannot get bonded, things like that. So my question is, how can we as a chamber perspective really work to encourage our small businesses to apply for the certification, and then once they get that certification, to move forward with contracts? And thank you.
Wow. Again, very powerful and important questions, and I'm not going to pretend to at all know all the answers to this. But again, discussions like this are a reminder of how much work we still have to do from the state to connect and reach out to chambers. By the way, I mentioned to the chairman yesterday and to others, the reason why these conversations are so important, again, is because of just the diverse nature of the chambers who are here. Sometimes when you hold gatherings like this, people say, oh, I don't go to that chamber. I don't mess with them. But that many, I don't know how many chambers are in the room, but the fact that you're able to do that, to bring that many kudos to have San Joaquin leadership here. A little bit to your question. First of all, we have to do a better job of informing you of what's coming down the pipeline. On the state side, there are 2 programs. Again, there's state contracts, there are federal contracts. What's coming down, we need to make sure that chambers know. And by the way, these contract opportunities are not always go pave a road, go build a bridge. There are opportunities that are just $100,000, $200,000 contracts, or opportunities where you can be a sub to a major prime. It's not all about like all these $50 million, $100 million contracts. Just a small business is getting their foot in the door, doing small and minor related project contracts for the state. So we got to make sure you know, help you get certified, and to your main point, how can you become more competitive to actually win the work? And that's where we have to do, honestly, do a better job all through that entire thing. And organizations like Ms. Gray, the Small Business Office for the state, where they can also be of help. If you haven't had a chance to meet her, please get her card as well, and Alejandro's card. But one thing I'm taking away from this for sure is we're going to have to do a better job of connecting through your chambers of all these opportunities of billions of dollars that are coming down the pike. I'm honestly disappointed that people don't know. So we'll do better. Thank you. Thank you for your question. Anybody else? One or two, I said several hands, sure, but she's waving no, like that's not gonna happen. But as many as you want me to take, I have a.
No,
Okay.
sorry, Secretary Toks. Director Gray is going to answer
Oh, yeah. Sure.
I just want to be your backup on that bonding question.
Oh, yeah, forgot about that, yeah.
Yeah, that's very, very real, significant barrier to participation for our small businesses. And I just want to say, I know that for you, from your perspective, Secretary, you've got to ensure that those contracts are delivered on time. You've got to make sure that the risk profile of those contracts is correct. And so I want to encourage everyone that is here and dealing with that. You heard the Secretary say be more competitive. What that means is to become less risky. It's about creating a risk profile for your small business that allows you to get access to contract financing and bonding. Because for all of the good work he is doing, he cannot fill that gap for any business. So we'll talk a little bit more about access to capital later, but I did just want to hit that point for you.
That's a very, very important point, Ms. Gray. Great. So, yeah, if you don't mind, please cover that. Insurance and bonding is something that's a barrier for small businesses, especially when it comes to big, major jobs.
Okay.
And being able to get bonded, have the requirements of insurance and all those things. She can help. There are companies in California that are actually helping companies through that process. So, an important thing to talk about as well. Yeah. Okay. I'm getting a signal. True honor for me to get a chance to number one.
Next to the stage, Mr. Derek Smith.
Derek, thank you. Can I get a mic? I want to personally thank Mr. Secretary for this very frank, honest, and effective dialogue. We don't get the opportunities, and this is what the California African American Chamber of Commerce brings, to get the answers from the man who sits next to the man, okay? But let me also say this, he's so humble. If I'm correct, Mr. Secretary, you went to Mississippi Valley State. Does anybody, and Jackson State, so that's prime. That's prime. Does anybody know, well, let me just, so we don't take too much time, the greatest wide receiver in NFL history, Jerry Rice, came out of Mississippi Valley State. Thank you. Thank you.
He keeps saying it.
Thank you for that, Timothy, Chairman. Next, I would like to introduce our next speaker, who's taking a picture right now with the Secretary. She is, as Director of the California Office of Small Business Advocate, Tara Lynn Gray serves as the voice for California's 4.2 million small businesses in the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. Under Director Drake Gray's leadership, the California Office of the Small Business Advocate focuses on helping to bring about Governor Newsom's California for All vision through further development of the state's small business ecosystem and by ensuring that the questions about equity and inclusion are the starting point for all state small business programs. Immediately prior to her appointment by Governor Newsom, Director Gray led the Fresno Metro Black Chamber of Commerce and the Chamber Foundation as CEO. Closing opportunity gaps, the role of women and BIPOC business leaders, and diversity in procurement opportunities are recurrent themes in her advocacy work. She has also led green economy initiatives, employment and training programs, and working to advance electric vehicle ownership. I just had the privilege today to meet Ms. Tara, and I look forward to working with her and her team in the future. I did know her predecessor, Isabella, who I had a great relationship with, and I look forward to working with she and her team in the future. Please welcome Tara Lynn Gray.
All right, y'all. Woo! I am a disruptor, so let me disrupt for a minute. Can we all stand up? Thank you, sir. Can we all stand up for one hot second, get the juices rolling? And if you all are like me, I've been sitting for a minute. Whew, stiff. Yes, all right, now we're ready to roll. I just want to say first, good morning, Los Angeles. Woo! It is good to be here today. I am always enthusiastic about talking to my brothers and sisters and talking about my brothers and sisters, because we are about our brothers and sisters' business. Okay, I got one in there. I had y'all get up so y'all would be paying attention. All right, so here we go. Want to first acknowledge all the friends and partners that are here today. Thank you, California African American Chamber of Commerce, specifically Board Chair Simon. I want to acknowledge Derek. Thank you for the introduction. Also, Pat, longtime colleague, different iteration. We did some work together. Ahmad, thank you as well. And everyone else that's been on the team to make this very auspicious and important occasion a reality this morning. I also want to say good morning to everybody else in the room that I don't know that came here to examine the African American contribution to the economy of California. As Derek said, I am Tara Lynn Gray. I am the director of California's Office of the Small Business Advocate. I was appointed by Governor Gavin Newsom on March 19th of 2021. I am the 5th director of Cal OSBA. My team and I are finishing this week a 6-region tour providing small business leadership training across the state. And it is fitting that the final session is here today, this afternoon at 2 p.m. So thank you, Chair Simon, for agreeing with us in purpose and delivery. I just really want to say that we cannot walk together unless we are agreed. And so thank you for your agreement in this. Also want to acknowledge the Secretary Unshaken. I am a big fan of his, and I thank you for your relentless work and prioritization of safety, equity, and clean transportation in our state. And I want to acknowledge and thank again, I know the Secretary already did that, but the electeds that are here today. With a special shout out to my friend, Mayor Robertson, because everything starts at the local level. Also want to acknowledge my staff that's here, seated up front, Juan Garcia, She is my program services, program staff services, you know how the government is, we have these long titles. Staff services manager too, but the real deal is she runs all of my programs. So the programs from inception to delivery, she is responsible for those. And then also here today is Michael Martinez, my small business local engagement specialist. Michael, wave your hand. Michael is responsible for the Southern California territory, so please reach out to both of these folks. One of the things that is on the menu at this conference is access. So once you find out who somebody is and what they do, it is incumbent upon you to access them. This month we celebrated the 40th anniversary of the King Holiday Bill, signed by President Ronald Reagan on November 2nd, 1983. This anniversary and Dr. King himself are very much still in my mind as I stand here before you today. The bill that created the annual commemoration of the life and legacy of Martin Luther King was signed in 1983. First, though, introduced just 4 days after his assassination on April 4, 1968. The bill was rejected 5 times, finally becoming law. So this month, as we celebrate him, we're really celebrating 40 years and the 15 years of activism that it required to secure national recognition of this man who had already become a hero to all of the world. As a key member of the Newsom administration, I am always aware that representation matters. And one of the things that has changed in 40 years is that we are now organizing events like today. Another thing that has changed is that someone like me, with a job like my job, can come to an event like this and be unapologetic about the development, financing, and prosperity of Black-owned businesses. I have to say that I'm humbled by what it means to stand here as a symbol of that progress. So, as I go across the state advocating for small business as a part of this administration, I am also known for my work as an advocate for the Black community. I, in this position, have clear sight lines on what still must be done and accomplished, fought for, to bring Dr. King's vision, his dream, to reality. Frequently, homages to King's legacy focus on his leadership in the fight for civil rights and racial equality, and rightly so. Especially in an era when the franchise itself is under attack, at the risk of dying a horrible death. But for myself, as a leader of economic development and business-focused organizations, I have always been inspired by his advocacy for economic equality and for economic justice. Let us remember that the formal name for that monumental gathering where he delivered his most famous address was the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Jobs and freedom. Throughout his life, he asserted that African Americans and other people of color could never achieve full citizenship until they had economic security. And today we often say that all of the reasons lumped together for this insecurity that remains out of reach, security remains out of reach, creating a condition of insecurity, is systemic racism. And this is the part of his legacy that resonates most with the calling that I have followed in my own life, the work that led me to heading California's Office of the Small Business Advocate. This is why I'm proud to work for a governor who just last year signed Executive Order N 1622, exhorting all state agencies to take additional actions to embed explicit analysis of equity considerations in policies and practices, and reminding us, and I'm quoting the governor here, quote, confronting inequality is not just a moral imperative, but an economic one, end quote. So I also want to thank the Governor Newsom, for his understanding of the blood, sweat, and tears that it takes to run a small business, and for supporting a California where we are all encouraged to dream big and to shop small. The governor has empowered me in my position to keep California small businesses the best in the world, because he recognizes that they help California economically outpace almost every other state and most Western democracies. As director of my office, Cal OSBA, I work to represent and to elevate the voices of California's 4.1. We went down, according to SBA numbers, from 4.2 to 4.1 million small business owners. That's the largest small business community in the country, and our small businesses provide half of all private sector jobs in the state and 2/3 of all net new jobs. That means that job creation grinds to a halt in California when our small businesses are not thriving. And we have the pandemic as the latest proof point of that economic fact. I like to imagine, when I think about Dr. King and his legacy, that like me, he would see entrepreneurship as a vector towards economic equality that he gave his life fighting for. I like to imagine meeting him, of being a voice at his table, to be able to co-labor on the policies that can support that aspiration. I wonder, what would he tell me? How would he advise me in my current position? What would he urge me to fight for with all of my might? I can only imagine those words of counsel and what they would be. But as small business advocate, I say that there are 3 keys to unlocking the potential of California's small businesses for job growth, economic impact, and economic justice. These are 3 big ideas that I like to imagine that Dr. King would want to see advanced in California. First, democratizing access to capital. Sadly, 40 years later, Black and brown-owned businesses are still denied capital at disproportionate rates, and too frequently in scenarios that cannot be explained by credit history or other lending risk factors. BIPOC-owned businesses receive less business financing, less often, and at higher rates. Banks subject BIPOC-owned businesses to more scrutiny than they do white business owners. And I could quote a bunch of numbers here, but to suffice it to say, it's not my study, it's not my opinion. It is well established by study after study, notably from the Federal Reserve and the Minority Business Development Agency. If we are to achieve economic justice and the related benefit of job growth, then we must root out both over racism in the institutions that control capital and systemic racism in the lending rules that dictate its use. We have to change the mindset of the financial industry so we worry less about the risk scorecard of any given deal and more about opportunity cost, right? The opportunity lost when we fail to unlock the human and economic potential of everyone in our state. We need a little less of the 3 C's and a little bit more FOMO. And if y'all don't know what FOMO is, that's fear of missing out when it comes to BIPOC-owned businesses. So here's an example. California is investing $180 billion in infrastructure. We heard the secretary talk about that. We only have a few years left. And thanks to AB 2019, signed by the governor last year, California now has a mandate to guarantee 25% participation by small businesses in all state contracts. So, when it comes to the state, and you heard the governor say at the top of the program, trillions of dollars, 3 specifically, in our economy, that's a lot of opportunity. We also, in California, just received $1.2 billion from the U.S. Treasury to capitalize state lending programs open to very small businesses and businesses owned by socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. And that's government speak for people who get lost, forgotten, right, in those funding gaps I mentioned earlier. The State Treasurer's Office and iBank are the lending arms that we are working with using that capital from U.S. Treasury. And they are incentivizing lenders to make high-risk loans, loans they might normally pass on. So this is good. $1.2 billion to grease the lending machines so that it can serve those people who have heard no more often than they have heard yes, too frequently with little explanation. And I always say that capital without technical assistance ought to be a crime. So my office is receiving $25.3 million to stand up a new program, and that program will be launching next month. It is technical assistance for capital readiness.
That's not talking, right?
You said next month?
Next month. It's not far. It is not far. I think that's next week. And we will be standing up a program that there has been tremendous interest in, and we will be focused entirely on access to capital. Because we know that it's not enough to incentivize the lenders, we must also support the borrowers. We must support them to be ready to compete in the marketplace for capital, to make the best choice in a high interest rate environment, and to optimize the use of capital once they receive it. So all of this is really an opportunity for California to more effectively break down those barriers to capital and to answer the #1 question that my office receives from constituents. That question is, where is the money and how do I get at it? Yes, so this is just one example of democratizing access to capital that tops my agenda. And before I move on, I do want to encourage you, I don't remember hearing Secretary say it, but all of those infrastructure projects that he mentioned and the ones that I am talking about now, you can find them at build.ca.gov. Again, build.ca.gov. My second priority is diversifying the innovation economy. The innovation economy is a phrase gaining more traction amongst economists and policymakers. It encapsulates the concept that new ideas from entrepreneurs replacing existing products and processes from established businesses is the chief driver of job creation. It is used to describe not the specific services of a single industry, but the creative ability of a population and ecosystem that can be powered by creativity. American management expert Peter Drucker has been quoted as saying innovation is the specific function of entrepreneurship. Whether in an existing